Good morning. I want to welcome Dr. Howard Sheikh to our class. And Howard is going to talk about high-frequency trading. And as you know, we have covered so far mostly technical rules that apply to somewhat low and medium frequency trading. And we are going to talk about high-frequency trading starting next week. And he's at the right time here. And he's also a practitioner. Howard works at Tower Capital, and he built the quantitative group at Tower Capital. And Howard has two PhDs, one PhD in aeronautical engineering from Oxford, and second PhD from Stanford in biomathematics or applied mathematics. And now you know what it takes to be a high-frequency trader. So he's going to give us some, broad overview. And please feel free to ask him questions. I think, these are the people who do these things on an everyday basis. They should be able to answer any questions that you have. And Howard also has kindly agreed to stay on after the talk, and you can discuss if you have any other questions related to not only trading, anything related to finance industry. Okay, let's welcome Howard. Thank you.
Good morning. Thanks very much for coming. I know how hard it is as a student myself once to wake up early in the morning on a beautiful summer day like this to come to the early morning lecture. Thank you. Thanks, Raja, for inviting me. So we've all heard the word HFT, especially in the news recently. Some people have asked me just how high is what's considered high frequency? What kind of frequency range we're talking about? That's one. The second thing people have asked me is, what are the characteristics of HFT? Well, not long ago, time measured in seconds or even minutes were considered high frequency. But nowadays, typical high-frequency tick-to-trade were measured way below a millisecond, up to the microsecond level. For those who are not familiar with the terminology, tick-to-trade is the measurement of time between the moment that a packet arrives at the network card to the moment that an order triggered by that packet, information of that packet, leaves the network card. So it's that time period, which is called tick-to-trade. Only recently, the CME, the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, one of the biggest exchanges in futures and options, have started to offer market data that are timestamped to the nearest nanosecond. So that gives you a sense of just what frequency range that we operate at. Right. So let's take a look at what are the typical characteristics of high-frequency trading. So I talked about, in terms of the frequency domain we operate at, so sub-millisecond and sometimes microsecond. That requires a trading infrastructure that's able to deliver, obviously, some microsecond, sub-millisecond at least, performance, which requires very optimized computer code and computer hardware operated by and maintained by some of the best engineers in the field. The second characteristic is the typical alpha forecast horizon of high-frequency models. So most of the models forecast ahead perhaps a few milliseconds, sometimes even maybe tens or hundreds of microseconds. So we're dealing with tick-by-tick market data here. The third characteristic is collocation of the trading boxes. So this is done so that we reduce as much as possible the latency between the trading box and the exchange matching engine. So in some cases, your trade box, where the strategy sits, is located in the same room as the exchange matching engine. It's not always possible, but for some exchanges, that is the case. Finally, I just want to talk about briefly the two typical types of HFT trading strategy. So market making. For market making strategies, these type of strategies tend to maintain a two-way quote in the market, which means that the strategy will maintain at least one buy order and one sell order in the market. And the premise is that it will try to capture the minute difference between the bid and ask price and try to profit from that. The second type of strategy is what's called a liquidity taking strategy. So for this type of strategies, when they trade, it will cross the bid-ask spread. So when it wants to buy, it will buy at the market ask price. And when they want to sell, it will sell into the market bid price. And these types of strategies tend to require a higher alpha content because you're crossing the bid-ask spread. And that somehow erodes the profitability of a particular trade or a particular forecast. Right. So what are the components of a high-frequency trading strategy? I think loosely speaking, there are three main components to a strategy. So the first component is what's called an order book construction engine. So what this engine does is it takes raw data from the market, it parses that data and extracts the order information from that network packet. So things such as what's the name of the order, name in terms of the ticker name, so IBM, Apple, or Treasury bonds. What's the size of the order, and also, obviously, what's the price of the order. What the construction engine does next is to piece together all these orders and construct what's called a limit order book. So for those who are new to the concept of limit order book, it's nothing but a list of orders. It consists of buy orders at various different price levels for different sizes, and also sell orders at different sizes and different market levels. We're going to take a look at a limit order book in a second. The second component is what's called a strategy engine. So what a strategy engine does is it takes the order book from the construction engine, and based on the transition of that order book, it will make trading decisions. So for example, based on the transition of the order book, your strategy might think, well, based on the history of the transition, I think the next tick, or within the next millisecond, the price is going to go up. So what the engine does, it would look at the inventory of what you're currently holding, and it will probably send out a buy order. So that buy order instruction is then passed down to the third component, which is the order management engine. What this order management engine does is it takes the instruction from the alpha engine, then it will encode that order into exchange understandable format, and that gets sent to the exchange. So let's quickly recap the three components, and also in terms of where it sits relative to the exchange. So on the left-hand side, you see the three components. On the top, you have the book building engine, which takes raw data from the exchange on the right-hand side. That raw data gets passed and the relevant information extracted. The book building engine then constructs an order book, and the state of the order book is then passed down to the strategy engine. Based on the state of, or rather transition of the state of the order book, the strategy engine will make a decision. Shall I buy? Shall I sell? Or shall I do nothing? Or shall I cancel some orders? Or maybe modify some of the orders, outstanding orders I have? So once the strategy engine has made a decision, it will instruct the order management engine below to send an order, cancel an order, or modify an order. The order management engine then, based on the type of order, it will encode that order into the format that the exchange requires, and that gets sent to the exchange. Once the exchange receives that order, it would do some preliminary checks, make sure the order is specified in the correct way, and it will then acknowledge that order, just basically saying, OK, great, I've got your order, it's in the right format, I'm going to start processing the order now. That acknowledgement is then sent back to the order management engine, And that, again, gets passed to the strategy engine. OK.
Why there is so many cancellations that take place? People just come in and leave. What would be the reason?
That's a very good question. For the typical market-making strategies, strategies tend to send out a lot of orders into the market on the two sides of the order book. So you have multiple orders and multiple price levels on this side, and multiple orders and multiple price levels on the other side. The reason people send out these multiple orders is to get the order queue advantage. So most order queues operate in a FIFO basis, first in, first out. So when you first arrive at the price level, you get some queuing advantage. And the order arrived subsequently will be queued behind you, which means that when the market trades, you will get the trade first before your competitor. So most quoting engines, most market-making engines will have multiple orders outstanding. And whenever there's a market event, book change, or some news event, the engine needs to cancel all these orders, hence the cancellations for this particular type of strategy. Yes?
So in this process, what is the bottleneck? Is it the processing speed of the strategy, or I imagine you use very large data sets, so processing this would require parallelization. And is it the fact that your code doesn't scale to the levels you want? What exactly is the bottleneck in this?
Right. That's a good question. There could be multiple levels of bottleneck. So one bottleneck could be between the book building engine and the exchange itself. You can imagine some big news happens in the market. There's a burst of market activities, and you're listening to 2,000 symbols from the NASDAQ, for example. Then your network card will get choked. There'll be multiple packets sitting in the buffer waiting to be processed, but your book building engine may not be fast enough to process all those packets. That's one bottleneck. The second bottleneck could be between the book building engine and the strategy itself. That depends on the complexity of your strategy. I mean, if it takes a long time for your strategy to calculate, of course, all the other book state changes will have to wait until that process is done. Does that answer your question? Yes?
A quick question. Just going back to the order cancellation, how prevalent are the traders doing basically testing out the water by spraying the exchanges with different orders and perhaps trying to tease out the potential buyers or sellers and then quickly canceling the orders and then readjust?
That is officially not allowed by the exchange, and that's something that most trading firms actually try to control for. So the exchange has a very good surveillance system that actually try to look for that kind of behavior. And also within the trading firms, they also have internal compliance checks to make sure that strategies are not sending out excessive cancels. Yes?
With a typical security, what would be the ratio of fulfilled orders to canceled orders?
It really depends on the type of security, and also depends on the trading strategy.
Right.
So I would say probably ballpark for equities will be maybe a couple of hundred per cancellations or messages per fill, per execution.
Right.
And be very different if you're trading, for example, cash bonds, which probably not very liquid itself. Then the ratio will be much lower. So in terms of message to execution.
And you're talking about the trade book side, or are you talking about like the strategy side, like
the cancellations?
Yeah.
The strategy side.
Okay, so that's internal. If you're one entity, you're going to be canceling 200 orders for every order that's filled.
Right.
On the trade book side, I mean, does that scale, or is?
How do you mean by the trade book side?
Like in the actual trade book in the market.
Right.
Is the ratio of actual fulfilled orders 200 to 1?
Right, I see what you're saying. Yes, yeah. It scales. So it's kind of similar ratio, similar ballpark for different asset classes.
Okay.
So for equity, it is around a couple hundred per execution. For cash bonds, it will be much lower.
I think when we talk about cancellations, we talk about cancellations in the order book. What they do internally is not too relevant.
Great.
Thanks. Any other questions? By the way, feel free to ask any questions. Feel free to interrupt. All right. So we've talked about the different engines on the client side, on the strategy side. So what happens on the exchange side? So let's ignore the small annotations for now, and instead concentrate on the flow from the top, which is where the three engines we just talked about, the strategy engine, the book building engine, and the order management engine, they reside in the first box. It flows down to the second layer, which are the exchange gateways, and so this and that are on the exchange side, and flows all the way down to the bottom where the matching actually takes place. So I use CME as an example in this case. So when after an order leaves the trade box, it reaches exchange and it reaches the exchange gateway. So each exchange could have multiple gateways. And what these gateways does is that they pass the order and does preliminary order check, make sure that it has all the necessary components, and then will acknowledge the order and back to the strategy. It also looks at order information such as what kind of order it is, whether it's limit order, whether it's IOC order, immediate or cancel, or what kind of symbols it is, whether it's crude oil, whether it's an order for natural gas, or soybean, or corn. And different engines, at least for CME, different engines match different product groups. So in this case, if the gateway sees, oh, this is a crude oil contract order, it will route that order to the crude oil matching engine. And if it's soybean, it will get routed to a different matching engine. So within the matching engine, this is where the matching between the buy side and sell side happens. Once the matching has taken place, the result of the matching is then passed back to the strategy via two main paths. The first path is the order reply channel. And this is a channel which is the connection between the strategy and the exchange gateway. The second path is via multicast broadcast to the listeners of this market, to the market listeners of this market. That then gets processed by the book building engine, and then a new book state is then constructed based on the result of the matching process. Right. Any questions? So you heard me mention the word limit order book a number of times. Just what is this limit order book? And how does it evolve as new orders get traded and as new orders get canceled, as old orders get canceled? Here I use an example. It's a 1-minute window order book snapshots for BP, British Petroleum, traded on the London Stock Exchange. This is back in June 2010. So each slice in the plot shows a snapshot of the order book, just before a trade is taking place and just after. So the solid black dotted line traces the market best ask, and the bottom dashed line traces the best bid of the order book. The black line in the middle is just the average of the best bid and best ask. So the black line is known as the mid-market, and the gap between the two dotted lines is known as the bid-ask spread. The bars on each of these slices gives you a sense of the relative size of the order at each price level. And I used a darker shaded bar to show the snapshot of the book just after a trade has taken place. And I used a lighter shade of purple to show the state of the book just before a trade has taken place. So let's walk through this order book evolution, and let's see a typical way that a market adjusts to, an order book adjusts to market movement. So let's start from the first slice. We see here that the book is reasonably balanced. So in terms of number of buy and sell orders, it's really reasonably balanced. And also the bid-ask spread is reasonably tight. So it's quite normal from the first, looking at the first slice. Next slice, we see a large sell order came into the market and took out 3 levels of the order book here. So these were taken out. With that, you see a widening of the bid-ask spread. This, in turn, induces more cancellation of the bid side in the third slice. So these orders were subsequently canceled. It sees there's a trade on the bid side, and it reacts to that trade by canceling the bid side. Next, we see the arrival of some of the sell orders coming in to close the bid-ask spread. So the spread widens and closes somewhat. Then the market can continue to trade down until it reaches equilibrium, and it trades sideways. So this is a typical mechanism through which the market adjusts down. So we start from a typical normal level with reasonably balanced order book. Then you see a large sell order coming in, takes out one or multiple levels on the bid side. So the bid-ask spread widens. And based on the trade on the bid side, there will be cancellations on the bid side. So that widens the bid-ask spread even more. Then you see sell orders start to come in. It will close the gap somewhat. Then the market will stabilize and trade sideways. Any question on this part so far?
So strategy looks at only the widening of the gap between the bid-ask spread, or does it also look at some sort of order book imbalance?
Yes, it looks at the order book imbalance and also the bid-ask spread. They give out different information. You can extract different orthogonal information from the imbalance or the skew of the order book, and also just how wide the bid-ask spread is and how quickly that spread gets normalized. Right. So once the market stabilizes, it trades sideways, then it would either go up and go down. So in this case, the market reverses up. Let's see through what mechanism the market goes up. Here, after the market's traded sideways for a while, you see the arrival of buy-side orders. Here. That closes the bid-ask spread, and you see some cancellation of the orders on the R side, and the main market starts to go up. Then after a while, the bid-ask spread normalized to where it used to be. Okay. So a couple of things you might notice in this plot is that there's some interesting dynamics in the order book adjustment, and also in the order arrival itself. So one is the clustering of order arrivals. So sell orders are often followed by more sell orders, and vice versa on the buy side. So there's you can think about it as a momentum effect. As the market goes down, start to go down, it will go down a bit more before it stabilizes. The other thing, which is probably not so obvious in this plot, is the cross effect. A sell-side order or sell-side execution sometimes induce buy-side execution. So whenever there's some trade in the market, either it's buy-side or sell-side, it might induce some action on the opposite side of the market. Okay. So let's take a look at these order arrivals and see whether we can see any interesting characteristics of these order arrival intensities. Ignore the top panel for now and concentrate on the bottom panel. So here I plotted the empirical arrival intensity of trades on the bid and ask side of the market. So market bid side here means a trade happened on the bid side. So someone sold to the bid side. And ask side market intensity means someone actually lifted the offer in the market. There's a couple of interesting dynamics that you can see from the arrival intensities. One is, I just mentioned earlier, the clustering effect of order arrivals. You see an uptick in intensity. In this case, the bid side intensity uptick is followed by more upticks on the bid side. And this intensity tends to persist. For those who have studied volatility process, this is very similar. The second thing you notice is the cross effect, the cross excitation of the intensities. So an uptick, in this case, of the big side intensity is followed by also an uptick, in this case, very small uptick on the sell side. The third characteristic is the decay of this intensity is somewhat exponential. So that looks kind of exponential here. It picks up and it decays in an exponential kind of fashion. Okay. Any question on this plot? Good. So what's a typical or what's a useful framework to quantify this intensity process? How do we model this? It turns out that a point process is quite well suited to model intensity process. Here, lambda 1 and lambda 2 are the arrival intensities for the buy side and sell side. And the mu's are the base intensity of the two sides. And the alpha sub 1,1 and alpha sub 2,2s are the parameters that govern the clustering effect of the intensity. And the cross effects are given by the alpha parameters alpha 1, 2, sub 1, 2, alpha sub 2, 1. And the betas are for decay. Okay. So we've got something to take care of the clustering effect. The higher the alpha, the more clustering you get. And you also have cross excitation here. So alpha 1, 2, sub 1, 2 means the effect of sell side orders on the intensity of the buy side. And the beta governs the decay. The higher the beta, the faster the intensity decays once it ticks up. Yes?
Is this the same as accounting for auto and cross correlations in the time series?
Yes, this will induce a certain cross correlation, auto correlation behavior. Good question. Okay. Let's see what the parameters look like if we fit the model to BP back in June 2010. Right. So on the left-hand side, we have the result of the fits. By the way, we fit this model. We could fit this model using a typical technique of maximizing the log likelihood function of a suitable objective function. So in this case, we use a time-changed, non-homogeneous Poisson process. Right. So let's take a look at the parameters. I think the main takeaway from the parameters fit is the asymmetry of the intensity on the buy and sell side for BP on that particular day. If you look at the mu's, and you see the mu for the sell side is significantly higher than the mu on the buy side. So that reflects the overall market condition for BP on that day. BP was trading down most of the time on that day. So there were more buy-side order arrivals than the sell side. So that makes intuitive sense. The other takeaway from the fit is the asymmetry in the cross-excitation. We see that the buy side has much bigger effect on the, rather the sell side has much bigger effect on the buy side. So alpha 1, 2, remember this is the effect of sell side orders on the buy side. That number is quite a bit higher than the buy side effect on the sell side. This again is consistent with the overall market condition on that day. Yes?
Yeah, the question, because the alpha 1, 2 should be related to beta 1, 2. Here the beta 1, 2 is really big, which means the decay is very fast.
Yes.
Right, so the effect is kind of, goes away too fast. When you say the assignment of buy to sell, it just means the length of the assignment is very short.
Yes,
Yeah.
the time point we're looking at in this case is probably measured in microseconds or milliseconds. Very, very small transient effect. It's a good observation. Okay. As a sanity check, want to make sure that this model is able to capture some of the characteristics we set off to describe. So one way to do sanity check is to simulate this process using the fitted parameters. Let's see what the simulation looks like. So on the right-hand side, I plotted the simulated result based on the fitted parameters. And here I flipped the sell side intensity, and so that we can make better comparison of the buy and sell side intensities, the simulated intensities. So we see that the model is doing a reasonable job. It's able to capture the self-excitation, the clustering effect of the intensities. You see an uptick in intensity on the buy side and the sell side are followed by more upticks in the intensity. So we've got clustering taken care of. The next thing is cross-excitation. So I think it's pretty clear from the simulated result that we definitely have a lot of cross-excitation here. And the final thing to check for is decay. So I think you can see maybe from here, and also here, it's exponential. Okay? Any questions?
Yeah. How much these parameters change from day to day? Say today the mu1 is smaller, bigger than mu2. Maybe tomorrow they will change the order, or they will stay stable.
Yes, the parameters do change quite a bit.
Quite a bit.
Yes, so it's up to the researcher, researchers decide what is the frequency that you refit the model, and also how much data you use to fit the model. One thing we have abundance of in high-frequency trading is data. So whenever you have any doubt, you can always go back to the data and try to see what is the appropriate time frame, duration, or number of data points you use to fit the model, and also how frequently you should fit the model. Yes?
So all models are to be used for some sort of prediction.
Yes.
How good is
Okay, I'll get to that in the next slide. So let's see, next slide, we're going to see how we're going to monetize this model, at least a potential way to monetize this model. Okay. Right, so for the budding traders in the room, this is at least one potential way to monetize this model. So based on the fitted parameters, and the model is able to give us a forecast of the intensity, arrival intensity of the orders on the bid side and R side, conditional on seeing arrival of certain buy or sell side orders. Then based on the model prediction, we can construct an imbalance of arrival on the bid side and sell side. Then based on that imbalance, we can come up with a simple rule that will give us a directional prediction of where the market is going to go within the next tick or within the next millisecond. So for example, upon seeing a sell side order, your engine will crunch through the numbers, and it will come up with a prediction or an estimate of the arrival intensity of the buy side and sell side. Then based on the difference of the two intensities, and also based on some threshold that you use, the strategy engine will decide whether to send a sell side order when it sees the buy side intensity is much higher than sell side intensity, or it will send a buy order or do nothing if the intensity or the difference of intensity doesn't pass a certain threshold. Okay. How to set the threshold? So that's again, I mean, there's so much data, and data mining is one technique that you could use to try to look for what is the appropriate threshold based on historical performance of the model. So once you come up with a threshold, once you come up with some rules of how you're going to make use of the intensity forecast, then people normally would do backtesting using historical data. Okay. So a quick word about backtesting. There are at least two different flavors of backtesting, different degrees of accuracy. So for most liquidity-taking strategies, if your strategy is not going to have too much impact in the market, the simulation is reasonably simple. However, for market-making strategies, it's very important to take into account the different matching engine details in the market, especially things such as the Q position of your order, whether your order belongs to a certain matching engine, matching order type, and also your interaction of your order relative to the market order, the other participant in the market itself. So the two-level simulation, one is a matching engine level simulation, which is the most detailed simulation, where the simulator actually simulates or try to proxy exactly what happens in the exchange matching engine. And the second type of simulation is a more simple backtesting that doesn't require the type of accuracy in a typical market-making strategy. Okay. Right. Just want to talk about some of the ongoing challenges from a researcher's standpoint for this field. The first challenge is to carry out in-depth market microstructure research. This includes market impact model, order queue dynamics, and also market event arrival, we just talked about. I believe the edge from the next generation of models will come from a detailed understanding of the market microstructure. The second challenge is a rapid convergence of the latency differential of the competitors. So the way to face this challenge is by doing more in-depth research, increase the model complexity, but at the same time, you have to control for the latency as a result of an increased complexity of the model itself. The third challenge is to explore software and hardware techniques. So for example, things such as more efficient use of GPUs, coprocessors, or even custom-made microchips. The fourth challenge is, well, stay up to date with the most recent academic research. Make sure that you understand the latest research, and also try to see whether you can make a connection between the academic research and real-life problems you're trying to solve. The final challenge is to research new markets. There are many new markets opening up to electronic trading, and each market will have its own characteristics. And each market requires rigorous research. Make sure they understand the characteristics. You're able to come up with the right modeling framework to describe those characteristics before the first ticket, the first order is sent out. Any questions?
Any questions?
Yes.
Thanks so much for giving us this talk. Just a quick question. It seems like you were dealing a lot with trades happening in milliseconds or microseconds. In our homework assignments, we use R, and it's taking a long time to do anything, generating any results. I'm sure you're using a different platform, so could you elaborate what kind of software packages are more suitable for this type of environments?
I personally use a combination of C++ and R myself. So R has a lot of interesting, first, it's very up to date in terms of the latest academic research. So you always have access to the best or latest packages out there. So that's a huge advantage, apart from being free. The second advantage is that it has a lot of packages that will help you to manipulate big data sets. For example, there's an easy way to parallelize your processing in R. So that could help in terms of when you manipulate big data set. That will help a lot by parallelizing the process. But at some stage, you have to move to C++ when the data set gets big or when the calculation is critical. Yes?
So when you're using C++, do you have your own suits, or do you just use layback or something which is already available when you're processing the data?
Right. So for low-level stuff, such as linear algebra, I think it makes sense to leverage as much as possible of what's out there. Building a linear algebra package from scratch is a serious endeavor. But for other needs, we have internal libraries that we could use to help us program more efficiently. So the combination of third-party packages, third-party libraries, and also internal purpose-built libraries.
I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
So if you go back to the graph on intensity functions, why can't we just model it? You've already discretized the data for 1 second level. Right? Why can't we simply use some sort of vector autoregressive type of models, see whether they yield better forecasts than building this mind processing models?
Right. That's definitely another approach to model. Well, this is a time series in itself. You could resample the data and use standard or classical time series techniques to try to help you make forecast. But in the resampling process, you lose some fidelity of data. So inter-arrival times itself tells you something about the market. If you resample, you lose some of that information. The second tricky thing about resampling is there's a lot of noise when you operate at this type of frequency. For example, noise such as, I guess people are familiar with the word bit-ask bounce, and also noise coming from asynchronous trading, for example. So asynchronous trading is basically a result of aggregation of market data for different venues. As you guys know, IBM, for example, is traded on multiple venues. So let's say you want to model IBM time series. Naturally, you want to aggregate all the data for different menus into one data set and merge it into one data set. But in the merging process, you got to be very careful in terms of the time differential or where you actually recorded the data. So when you operate at millisecond and microsecond precision, it's very important that the clock is exactly synced. They will never be exactly synced, but you want to have a way to control for that. So that's another tricky thing if you resample data, the noise. Yes?
I would like to ask how promising or possible it is to incorporate like public modes and news information arrivals can be used in high frequency trading, because there are works in the first one in 2014 trying to model the different behaviors of different traders using artificial neural network, and this work is on Nature. And there are also works on text mining Twitter tweets. I don't know which article, which journal this one is, but it's got a few thousand citations. But these algorithms, like data and text mining algorithms, are on the time scales of a few minutes. And the public modes and this information will influence the market microstructure, I mean, more quickly than this algorithm can capture. So I'm wondering if there is any possibility of incorporating this information into, not only look at the bid side and ask side alone, but also incorporate like public modes.
Right. That's a good question. So this intensity model might not have a natural way to incorporate news, but a different modeling framework can definitely can leverage some of the news, or some of the streaming news, for example, out there in the market. There's been some work done on trading based on, for example, you mentioned Twitter news feeds. The tricky thing in that case is, again, you got to find the right balance between signal and noise. Sure, there's some relevant Twitter broadcasts, but also at the same time, for every relevant news, you probably have 100 irrelevant Twitter news that has nothing to do with the stock price. People just speculating where the stock is going to go, but has no real signal content. So it is up to the researcher to decide and to come up with the right model so that you can filter the noise, so you extract the most relevant information from those news sources.
So there is currently no, really working algorithm that incorporates these effects, right?
Well, I'm sure there are algorithms out there that already leverages news.
Time scale of milliseconds.
It depends on what kind of news source. So let's say your news source is, let me give you one example. So one type of news is economic release. For example, your payrolls every month, or your jobless claims on every Thursdays. So that's news. That's a piece of news that can have a big, sometimes significant impact on, for example, treasury bonds. So that kind of news, if you can get a very fast feed for those news, you can come up with a strategy that operates within milliseconds and microseconds. But so for other type of news, for example, you could have an algorithm that parses just web pages. That will give you a more long-term kind of sense of how well IBM is doing, how well Apple is doing, what's the general public consensus of how the Apple Watch is performing. So that's more of a long-term, that'll give you more of a long-term forecast. So it depends on the news, and also it depends on the model that goes with the news. Yes?
Up that question, I mean, when we're looking at high-frequency trading, how often do people incorporate other, non-associated esoteric data sources, right, into their trading algorithms when you're operating on a high-frequency, level, sub-millisecond level? Or is it very common? Are you typically just looking at market data, or do you have other data that you're going to be incorporating?
Right. The most, I guess the most important source of information is encapsulated in the order book. That already has a lot of information in terms of arrival of different types of orders, the shape of the order book, and how fast will people cancel, or how many times do they cancel, and based on what information that they cancel. So that has a lot of information in the order book. But sure, there will be other exogenous sources, such as news, that could also sometimes sort of complement the order book itself. Yes?
So going back to filtering out the noise, how exactly is it done at this stage? Because you have a very long time series, which is quite dense. So I would imagine you can actually find the intensities of different frequencies and then just remove what is not intense enough. Is that how it is done, or is there a more heuristic approach if information which is not directly from the market, like news or Twitter feed, is being incorporated? How exactly do you filter out what you think is not important?
Right. Most of the times, the filtering could be done or controlled by information contained in the order book itself. You actually don't need any other external news or external data to help you do the filtering. The tricky thing is to decide what is noise, what's not noise. Let's assume that people don't trade randomly. They don't just toss a coin and trade. So every trade is for a reason. But that reason might not be relevant to your model, or might not be relevant to your forecast horizon. If someone wants to buy IBM and sit on it for 10 years, that's not relevant when you want to make a 1 second ahead prediction. That's noise to you.
So then, let's say the data is autocorrelated for, say, 10 seconds, and then anything with a frequency of less than 1/10 seconds is noise for you. You just neglect that because that is not going to affect you. Is that how it is done? Or?
Yes, that's definitely one way to look at what's noise, what's not noise. So based on your forecast horizon, and you filter out things which are not going to add any value to your forecast. Yes.
I have a question about the role of machine learning in high-frequency trading. Are they used to recognize some profitable pattern of order books?
Any patterns in the order book?
Are they used to recognize those patterns or profitable patterns?
Yes. So machine learning is definitely one set of tools that people use in the business. And there are many patterns. We looked at the order book before. You can see the pattern of the order book, how they adjust when market goes down. So sell orders come in, take out a few levels, cancellation, then arrival of more sell orders, and the market trades sideways. That's a pattern in itself. So machine learning is a big area, and there's a continued sort of research work done in that area to try to use a more efficient machine learning methods to recover the pattern in the market. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yes.
So when you decide to enter the market, do you use limit order or market order?
I think most people use a combination of limit orders and also what's called marketable limit orders. So limit orders is, I guess you are familiar with the concept of limit orders. So let's say IBM is trading at 99 bid and 100 offer. So a limit order will be, I want to buy IBM at 99. So you submit an order at 99. You will join the best bid in the market. So a marketable limit order is the effect of that limit order is the same as market order, but you have a price limit. So in this case is, say you want to buy IBM, you will submit a limit order to buy IBM at 101, which is clearly above where the current ask is. So you will trade immediately.
So your goal is to trade as quick as possible, but you don't want too much loss if the price has a sudden change.
So in this case, the reason people use marketable limit orders is that you have certain protection in terms of price protection. A market order, you don't specify what price you want to trade. You just want to say, I want to buy IBM, I want to buy 100 shares of IBM, I want to sell 100 shares of Apple. You don't care what the price is.
But you still want to enter the market as quick as possible.
Yes. So in terms of speed, the two doesn't make that much of a difference in terms of speed when it comes to the matching engine.
So I have another question. You only talk about when the signal comes, you will decide to enter the market, but how do you close your position? We know we have some simple strategies like stop loss or stop profit, but is there any other examples you can provide?
Sure. So stop loss is, again, triggered by some event. So stop loss is because the market is traded at a certain level. That will be triggered by a certain event. So things such as you might have a threshold of holding period threshold. Let's say you only want to hold your inventory for 2 seconds. That's obviously nothing to do with market events anymore. You just have a clock that runs, that checks your position. So in that case, it's not triggered by the market. It's totally triggered internally. But most of the times, your action will be triggered by some event that happened in the market.
Does that mean another signal comes and you decide to clear your position?
Yes. So it'll be a triggering event. And that triggers the rebuild of the order book, and also that itself triggers recalculation of the strategy engine. And a new order action will result. Yes.
Do you see IEX as being the beginning of a trend or kind of an anomaly?
There's definitely a lot of talk recently about the regulation of the business, and especially to do with what people think are favorable kind of treatment of exchanges to maybe some of the trading firms. So IEX is one way to address that. Yeah, I don't have any further comment on IEX myself. So it's not something that I've looked at in detail.
Could you also comment on market fragmentation, what are the challenges, and also hidden orders that we talked about? What are the challenges in modeling this kind of data?
Right, sure. So market fragmentation, that's, I mentioned earlier about when you want to merge data set, it becomes a headache when you need to think about clock skews, when you think about synchronization on market data. That's because of the fragmentation of the market. Same symbol trades on different markets, and they all have their own behavior. Each market will have its own behavior. And from a researcher's standpoint, when you want a nice and clean data set to work on, that becomes a challenge, just to clean the data set, make sure the data set is in a workable sort of format. The second thing is hidden orders. Is everyone familiar with hidden orders?
Is that the same as dark pool?
Similar concept. So on some of the public exchanges, you have two types of orders that could be classified as hidden. The first type is iceberg orders. So these are orders you send out. Let's say you want to buy 1,000 IBM shares. One way to do it is just to submit a bid to the market. Say you want to buy 1,000 IBM. And there's a couple of reasons you don't want to do that. And one of the reasons is that you don't want to scare the market. I mean, 1,000 IBM could be a lot of shares, and you might be pushing the market against you. So you want to be careful. You want to break your orders into smaller pieces. So one way to do it is to send a what's called an iceberg order. So you tell the exchange, okay, this is an iceberg order. Want to buy 1,000 IBM, but I only want to show 100 shares in the market. So the exchange will show 100 shares in IBM, although you want to buy 1,000. But the rest 900 are sort of, in a way, sort of hidden. Once your 100 IBM trades, the exchange will automatically replenish your order by another 100 IBM. And you will keep on doing that until all your 1,000 IBM shares are filled. So that's iceberg order. Another type of hidden order is, on NASDAQ, there's a type of order called mid-peg order. So in this case, your order, let's say you want to send a bid order into the market. You want the order to be pegged, was pegged to the mid of the market. So say IBM is trading at 99, 100. You want to peg your order to the mid of IBM. So you want to peg order at 99.5. But no one can see your order that's pegged at 99.5. Your order will only execute, or people will only know the presence of your order when someone tries to sell IBM at 99. He will get a pleasant surprise. He gets filled not at 99, but a much better price, at 99.5. And you get filled at the price you want, which is 99.5. So that's another type of hidden order in the market. So from a research standpoint, these hidden orders present interesting challenges. The first challenge is you don't know the presence of these hidden orders. You only see the effect of these orders when they trade. And the only way to figure out just how much hidden orders are out there is try to infer from what's traded in the market, what hidden orders are traded in the market, and get a sense, and try to model that behavior and get a sense of what hidden orders, or how much hidden orders are out there. So that's the research challenge.
The recent data indicates as much as 30% of the orders.
That's possible. So the order type I mentioned, peg order, it's pretty popular on some of the exchanges. You can imagine big insurance companies, pension funds, they sometimes need to balance their portfolio. And the last thing they want to do is to submit a very large order into the market and try to and scare the market. So hidden order is one tool that they could use to somehow control the inventory and control the signaling effect of large orders.
Any questions?
Yes?
Could you have some comment on the strategy capacity for high-frequency trading?
Capacity in terms of how scalable.
Yeah, how much money you can trade for this strategy?
That's a good question. So one constraint of high-frequency trading is most of the times, or most of the strategies, it's not scalable. Not scalable in the sense that if you make X dollars trading Y shares, if you trade 2Y, doesn't mean you make 2X. One, the market doesn't have the capacity to sustain the increased size. The other is it's a very competitive market, and your trading behavior is scrutinized by other people, other competitors. So there's a constant race between different trading firms. So scalability is somehow constrained in that way as well.
So how much money can you take typically for a HF strategy?
It really depends on the strategy and also the asset class. But on average, high-frequency strategies tend to have a higher Sharpe ratio than the traditional type of strategies, such as statistical arbitrage or other type of relative value trading. but the catch is it's not scalable. It's not as scalable as your classical hedge fund type of business, such as startup. Does that answer the question?
But if it's not scalable, the fund cannot earn much money from it, why is it still useful?
So one way to scale is to explore new markets. So that's one very important thing that we're constantly doing. As new markets open up to electronic trading, you want to, if not the first one, we want to be there as early as possible. So that's one way to scale. The other way to scale is by trading more assets, more different types of assets. So you could be trading or anything which is tradable on the electronic exchange. So stocks, bonds, commodities.
So you can use one strategy on many assets and markets.
Sometimes. Most of the times the models are not so transferable from one asset class to another. So for example, a typical equity strategy might not be applicable when you use the trade cash bonds, for example, because the asset class is so different. Any other questions?
One last quick
Yes.
question. In the model that you described, the cross correlations were not equal. So alpha 1, 2 was not the same as alpha 2, 1.
Yes.
And I remember you mentioning that the three quantities that you were talking about, the number of, the spread, the number of buys and the number of sells, these are not orthogonal. So wouldn't it be, I mean, if you could find the orthogonal directions, then you would not have the alpha 1s and alpha 1, 2s and alpha 2, 1s. Wouldn't it improve the way you are looking at the data if you only looked at the orthogonal directions so that they're not impacting each other?
Right. So your suggestion is to find the orthogonal directions and model orthogonal directions independently. Sure, that's definitely one way to do it. And if you can, that again requires some modeling to come up with how you're going to project the data into orthogonal coordinates and how many dimensions you want to project it to. That's another layer. It becomes another layer of complexity that you need to.
You have three, and if you expect them to not be, rank efficient, you would have three orthogonal directions. But just how you would go about finding it, I guess that would be a challenge.
Right. So that's definitely one possible way of doing it. Yes.
The point process you just modeled seems to be unmarked. Do you have any suggestion for marked point process?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I actually posted two links to two papers. And in the first paper, you can see more detail of the point process I mentioned in the slides. And also it talks about how you incorporate some of the other limit order book features as marked in a marked point process. And the second paper is a very good paper on market microstructure in general. For those interested, it's well worth a read, the second paper. By the way, I'm going to stay behind after class for a bit, so feel free to come up and ask me any questions.
I think it's very nice of Howard to take time off from his busy schedule to come and talk to us. And as he mentioned, he's going to stay around for a while, so you can have more questions for him. And Peter Layton, who would be here on Monday, has done some work using the Twitter data. You can ask him questions, and I think we are going to have two more speakers next week, and you'll get more out of industry practitioners on what they do. Okay, let us thank Howard for his time and for his good lecture.